Hello class, and welcome back to Management 322. Today, we will be diving into the topic of contract sourcing. Many of the projects that we execute within the Air Force utilize third-party companies that procure materials, render services, or both to meet government requirements. An agreement must be made between the government and these entities in the form of a contract. Today, we will talk about the acquisition methods that are commonly employed in Air Force contracting, how we, as civil engineers, fit into the contract process, and how contract proposals are evaluated. Once again, let's start off with some definitions. You may have heard the terms fixed price or cost reimbursement thrown around. What people are referring to using these terms are types of contracts. A fixed price contract, by definition, provides a firm price. Let's walk through an example. Imagine your lawn needs mowed, and you want to hire someone to perform the work. After speaking with a neighbor kid, they agree to mow it for you for a flat rate of $20. After the job is done, you pay them that agreed on price. This would be an example of a fixed price contract. Now the other type of contract here is called cost reimbursement. These contracts provide for payment of allowable incurred costs. Let's imagine that, once again, your lawn needs mowed, and you are unsure of the exact size of your yard. You ask a different neighbor kid to mow your lawn and agree to reimburse them for gas used in the mower and any additional items they purchased to get the job done. Your neighbor provides you all the receipts they have for purchases related to mowing of your lawn, and you would reimburse them for that. Notice this requires some auditing on your part to review the receipts. Since you are happy with the work that the kid did, you pay them a little extra as an award fee. This would be an example of a cost reimbursement contract. Both types of contracts are detailed within the Federal Acquisition Regulation, Subpart 16. Now, there are a host of reasons why you would choose a fixed price contract over a cost reimbursement contract or the other way around. This image shows each type of contract and how they relate to risk. On the bottom of the scale, we have a well-defined and known requirement. This is something that has been vetted amongst a variety of stakeholders and has been properly planned to detail. Sounds like a good civil engineer project, right? When such conditions exist, a fixed price contract will be our best option. Because details of the scale and nature of work are known, we can transfer risk to a contractor and hold them to an agreed time and cost standard. However, if we don't have a well-refined scope, and there needs to be some flexibility on what is delivered, a cost reimbursement contract may be a better option. The problem here is we don't have a great idea how much the final cost will be, so much of the project risk stays with the government. When it comes down to civil engineer projects, we largely want you to be familiar with fixed price contracts. Another acronym you may have heard thrown around the squadron would be IDIQ. This stands for an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract type. These contracts are used to acquire supplies or services when exact times and exact quantities of future deliveries are not known at the time of award. Just think, it's a requirement that you know you'll need, but you just don't know how much. It is much faster to make an IDIQ contract ahead of time rather than scrounging many small contracts and putting them together every time that a recurring need pops back up. The Air Force commonly uses a variety of IDIQ contracts. Most often, there will be a simplified acquisition of base engineer resources, or SABRE contract, established and managed within the engineering flight. This contract is excellent for small-scale projects that require minimal design and need to be executed quickly. SABRE contracts are awarded to a contractor for a period, typically 1 year with several option years available, and a minimum amount of work will be guaranteed to that contractor. Once in place, projects will be placed on a task order and get assigned to the contractor. For more complex, multidisciplined projects that require design work, a MAC contract will be more appropriate. MAC stands for Multiple Award Construction Contract and are typically awarded to a pool of contractors. When a project arises, the members of this pool compete for the work. This establishes a pre-qualified list of companies that you are already familiar with but still retains competitive bidding. Others that you may hear about are multiple award task order contracts, MATOCs, or job order contracts. Here's a quick reference summary for MAC and SABRE contracts. Take note of program sizes, number of contracts, their flexibility, and how responsive they are. Feel free to save this summary for future reference. Let's walk through several examples to drive home which contract type may be most appropriate for some civil engineer applications. Take this requirement for an office building addition. It is a multidiscipline project that requires several crafts and is estimated to cost $3.5 million. Due to the large cost and known scope of work, this project could be awarded as a one-off fixed-price contract. However, you can save time by not soliciting to every vendor on the market by using your MAC contract with a pool of vetted contractors where a full design can be accomplished and competitive bidding is still available. This project involves installing a new chiller at a flight simulator facility. The cost is well within limits of a SABRE task order, and the work can be considered non-complex with minimal design. Would you want to waste a bunch of time and effort soliciting a small dollar amount contract for a single chiller? Probably not. Putting this project on a SABRE task order would likely be your best option. This project requires an entirely new facility with some special requirements related to HVAC and electrical for some specialized equipment in the facility. While the cost is low, a from-the-ground-up type project like this may be best suited for a MAC, especially considering the amount of design that is required. This last project looks to replace some roll-up doors that were damaged in an accident. The cost estimate came in around $150,000, and considering the work, this is a great option to execute via your base's SABRE contract. Again, any project could be a standalone contract, which is solicited to every vendor on the market, where you grade all vendors for technical competency and lowest price. But this type of project would be best fitted for a fast award, small dollar, simple IDIQ. Use that SABRE contract. Some IDIQ contracts that aren't necessarily a SABRE or MAC that you can also see on your base include contracts for roofing, paving, and carpet. Notice how these contracts group like requirements together for known, repetitive work. These contracts provide a streamlined approach for getting that certain type of work done. Now that you have a good understanding of what contract types are out there, let's talk delivery method. How exactly are you going to go about getting these requirements on a contract? Is it going to be all in one, or does the nature of our scope of work demand something else? Most often, for civil engineer projects that require a design, think new buildings or complex renovations, we will pursue a fixed price construction contract utilizing a design bid build delivery method, or DBB. This means that we will gather our requirements and contract an architecture and engineer firm, or A&E firm, to perform a complete design. This gives great design control to the government, and once a design has been completely and agreed upon, the government will take that design and include it in a solicitation package for yet another contract. The second contract will then build your project using the supply design and specifications. The big thing we want you to remember here is that design bid build requires two separate contracts, one for design, one for construction. Acquisition processes need to be followed in order to establish each contract separately. An alternative to design bid build would be design build. This delivery method streamlines the acquisition process and awards only a single contract that will include both design and construction of your project. There are many benefits to using a design build delivery method, such as the designer and constructor are working together from the beginning, and timelines are reduced for contracting processes. This method does lessen design control from the government, as often construction may begin before designs are actually completed. Also, you must have a very experienced project team to execute a design build process, as it takes much more time and strategy to properly prepare the scope of work. Up to this point, we've spoken much about types of contracts and delivery methods. But how do we get a contractor hired and working? Here's a quick rundown of our contracting process. It starts in the top left and moves right. When you have a new construction project assigned to put on contract, the first thing you want to do is assemble your project team, and together you will walk through these steps. Intuitively, you can look at this slide and guess that it can take a lot of time to put a project on contract. That is reason enough to assemble a strong team of experts to get this work done. Once the team is assembled, initial market research can begin. This is aimed at finding best practices to incorporate into your project. Some large milestones in getting a contract awarded is writing the work statement, assembling specifications, compiling an independent government estimate, and securing funding. All these comprise the procurement package, which should be compiled and submitted to contracting as soon as possible. Typically, the project manager will have responsibility for developing the work statement and independent government estimate. In our next lesson, you will learn a great deal more about work statements and their importance. Independent government estimates are largely based off a Class 1 quantity takeoff cost estimate that is developed by you and your project team. It is this cost estimate that the contracting officer will use to measure against a contractor's proposal. We highly suggest taking AFIT's Management 200 and 400 courses to learn more about cost estimating. Items that have a yellow star next to them indicate significant involvement by the project manager. Once these documents are compiled, contracting is going to publicize the requirement on a web page known as sam.gov, where contractors can view upcoming federal contracts. About 15 days later, contracting will release the solicitation or request for proposal, RFP. At this point, interested contractors will start putting together proposals. These are document packages that communicate a company's offer to the government's proposed contract. Keep in mind, contracting has options available to them. An example would be the use of an 8A contract. These include set-aside contracts for small businesses or sole source contracts. We aren't going to delve into the details here, but feel free to ask your contracting officer about these options. Once proposals come in, usually about 30 days later, we will evaluate the proposals and contracting will award the contract. Notice this is another piece of the process that the project manager has a high degree of ownership with. After a post-award kickoff meeting, the contractor will begin construction work and submitting invoices every 2 weeks or so depending on circumstances. When we get close to completion of the project, we get into issues like pre-final inspection, final inspection, building occupancy, and final acceptance. You'll learn a lot more about this in the construction management and inspection lesson of this course. Make sure you talk with your local contracting office to understand how long this entire process will take, considering the specific contract you are trying to award. We spoke about the differences between design bid build and design build. Remember that in design bid build, you award 2 separate contracts. Each contract will require this entire process. Think of how that will impact your schedule. On the last slide, we noted that the project manager will have a large part in evaluating proposals. How exactly does that process work? Are we just tossing darts at a dartboard? This isn't quite the case, and luckily, there's something called the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, that details how we select contractors to perform work. On this slide are the primary means that we use to evaluate contract proposals. You'll notice on the top that these methods vary by how technically complex your scope may be. Let's say you need a simple sidewalk paved. You put together your contracting package and a request for proposal is issued. Because the nature of the work is not technically complex, you will evaluate contractor bids at a prescribed date and time. Until this time, bids will remain sealed, and the amount that each contractor has proposed will not be known. A contractor with the lowest bid will win the contract at opening. Oftentimes, in civil engineer projects, we will utilize what is known as low price, technically acceptable. The FAR states that this process is appropriate when the best value is expected from result of selection of the technically acceptable proposal with the lowest evaluated price. You will define what is technically acceptable based on what is most important to the success of your project. This gives the project manager some flexibility and may not lock you into the lowest bidder. Performance price trade-off is when companies will produce a price proposal and past performance proposal. This enables a project team to select the awardee based off both technical acceptance as well as how well the contractor has performed in the past. The big point here is going back to our competency of project team management. It is important to know the types of proposal evaluation processes that exist, but at the end of the day, your contracting officer will be the subject matter expert on the details of how each process works and should be used. Keeping that working relationship healthy and knowing your role in the contracting process will be extremely beneficial to your project. Well, that's a wrap for the contract sourcing lesson. We explained acquisition methods used in Air Force construction projects to include types of contracts and delivery methods. We touched on the overall documentation and processes involved in getting construction contracts off the ground. And finally, we looked into some methods for evaluating proposals and how contractors are selected for a project. To learn more about Air Force construction contracts, please look at taking some of our other AFIT courses.